Section 2 of the class looks at taking ethics and the understanding of ethics that we currently have, and that's what we were developing in the first section, and trying to put them into play in the quote-unquote applied aspect of what it is that we're doing. Now, being able to do that requires a couple of different things. The hope is that individuals that are taking this class that are in graduate school, be it an MBA or in our program here in the Masters in Sport Management, the idea is that you're going to be in some sort of leadership position. And leadership, obviously, is something crucial to all organizations. And since we're in the business of sports, recreation, and physical activity, understanding the cyclical nature of leadership and where it starts and where it goes and that type of thing. So when you're trying to take ethics as we know and embed it in an understanding of organizational dynamics, then it makes sense to kind of keep in the back of our mind how decision making and leadership are associated with these various ethical dimensions. Specific to sport management, one of the things that's very, very important about examining the role of leadership in any sport organization is understanding how to evaluate it and realizing that, yes, we've set very specific goals, but have we met these goals? And goals oftentimes, from a kind of a psychological point of view, understanding the goal setting process and the achievement of goals isn't necessarily a fiscal matter. It's nothing necessarily finite. Some goals can be abstract, such as we're trying to be much more of an inclusive sport organization or have much more of a positive impact on our community. Well, how do we go about doing that? Or if we want to make sure that the athletes or the student athletes that we're involved with exemplify some of the values of role modeling and sportsmanship, things like that, how do we go about doing that? Well, as a result, when you start looking at and trying to evaluate whether you've accomplished your goals, then you start to see that goal setting and goal achievement are part of some sort of larger process. You have the planning process where you're starting to put everything together. Well, you can't plan about goals until you've identified them. Okay, and so that's all going to be embedded in this planning process. Well, as you start moving on and get to the business, quote unquote, of leading, proper leadership means making proper decisions. Decisions that are what? Well, one of the things that we're going to do, one facet of decision making that we're going to be involved with in this second part of the class is the ethical decision making. When you start looking at and trying to examine the ethical dilemmas that are going to be associated with whatever decisions you're going to make in your organizations, it behooves us to think on a variety of different levels. And when you start looking at how goals can be achieved and set, there are four basic ways, four basic categories that you can go about doing this: societal, professional, organizational, and participant goals. Societal goals are those things much like we spoke about with corporate social responsibility. The idea that our small little sport organization can actually have far-reaching effects or impacts on the world, the community around us. And some people would go so far as saying, we actually have an obligation to do that, much as every other business-based organization does. And one way we can do that is through improving quality of life. And how do you improve quality of life? Oftentimes it's through the advent or the very, very conflictual process of social change. And one of the things that we've seen throughout the history of the United States anyway is that social change often can be brought about by major institutional spheres, and the institution of sport is no example. If we think of racism and Major League Baseball's decision to break the color barrier in 1947 with Jackie Robinson, that's far-reaching social effects. If you look at changing the role in the way that women are perceived in regards to physical activity, or if you think about MMA and male and female athletes involved in that, you have all these different ideologies and stereotypes, and one way to go about evolving those ideologies or stereotypes is through an institution such as sport. Your organization, as a result, is going to be part of a larger profession. Okay, so the profession of sport management. And sport management is governed by a lot of different things, and this whole notion of professionalism and what constitutes professionalism. There's a couple different things. One is you're going to be paid for your credentials. you're going to be trained in certain activities. And so you all are, achieving your master's degrees, and as a result, theoretically, you're going to be paid more than those that have a bachelor's because you have more training. Now, as you start, there's a wide variety of different types of training that you can secure throughout your professional career. You can stay updated on different, technologies or things like that. But another thing that you can do is, you can go back and get a master's degree. You can go back and get a certificate in human resource management. You can learn about the role that sport can be in the whole counseling process. There's a lot of different things that you can do for this whole idea of training. Also, within the industry of sport management, we have performance standards. And not just the certification aspect, but there are certain criteria for success in performance. We know that within college athletics, because these individuals are working on a college campus, because of the nature of higher education, if you're going to go into college athletics, you're more than likely going to need a master's degree. That certification, which shows that you are comfortable blending not only the academics but also the athletics together. Every industry has a code of conduct, a code of ethics. NASM, North American Society for Sport Management, is no exception. We have one as well, as you've seen as you've without a doubt read through the other aspects of the course. So these codes of conduct are important for establishing basic parameters of professionalism within any industry. The organizations that you're a part of will have their own specific goals as well. Now, my job is not necessarily to tell you what those goals are going to be, because the goals of each organization are going to vary based upon the size and the scope and the mission of all these organizations that you're involved with. If you're much more of a small grassroots organization, such as the Special Olympics here in the region that Wichita is a part of, it's much more of a smaller organization that's kind of in tune with the whole idea of not-for-profits, participation, bringing about education, awareness, and kind of a social rehabilitative aspect of sport. Okay? Well, that mission is not good, that's not bad, but that's going to be very different than maybe one of the professional sport organizations in town. While there are going to be different areas where they overlap in terms of some of their good works in the community, there's going to be much more of a focus on revenue, for example, within the world of professional football or professional soccer that we have here in Wichita. Finally, it's also kind of interesting that sport has the opportunity to dramatically impact individuals. And this kind of starts looking at things, if we started at the societal level on one end, it's a very, very macro way of thinking about the world. Well, this is the most micro way of thinking about it. The fact that sport, for a variety of different people, has a socializing force on their life. Essentially meaning that people grow up in communities, they need to learn individually how to be a part of that particular community. Sport sometimes provides the opportunity to do that. It also provides the opportunity for, we talk about sensory stimulation, physical expression. Learning healthy habits start young, and oftentimes sport, PE, playing those physical games are very important to not only the institutionalization of health and wellness on a societal level, but maybe even more importantly, connecting and having that individual see that physical activity and eating right and the awareness and understanding of all those different things and how to fold it into their personal life. Sport can play a process in all that kind of stuff. So depending on what the goal of your organization is, you're going to be involved with all of these at some point. All right? And it's trying to take your industry and your organizational goals and have those set up in such a way so that you can still address some of those societal goals and still provide individual participant goals. Now, in doing that, you find yourself oftentimes in ethical dilemmas. Ethics is that kind of murky water of, we need to make a decision. Decisions are going to impact lots of different people, lots of different groups, lots of different constituents in a wide variety of different ways. And how do you balance all that? Each dilemma, each situation, each scenario, for example, is going to be a little bit different. And sometimes you're going to emphasize more the societal goal as compared to emphasizing the participant goal. keeping in mind that strong leadership is going to recognize that all four of these things are operating simultaneously in every situation. Proactive behavior is kind of interesting. It's something that's, as an industry, sport management has become increasingly involved with. And it's the idea that we, as a professional entity, an industry, have a positive impact on society. And so the MVP program, what it was looking, the Mentor in Violence Prevention program, it's basically taking former student athletes and going out to college teams, high school teams, professional teams such as the Boston Red Sox, their minor league affiliates, and their major league team go through this program. And it's the idea of using something like domestic violence, for example, as a case study for showing people how things should be done. Different ways of benefiting participants, different ways of benefiting society. And the whole idea of being proactive is taking that CSR initiative or that basic idea of social responsibility one step further. One step further in the sense that we're not just being reactive, and whenever there's a problem in a community, we're going out and we're providing some sort of resolution to that. No, it's taking upon ourselves and our organization to try and head off some social ill of the past. And you see this a lot, actually. I mean, if you want to think of the NBA's Reading to Achieve program as trying to use the celebrity status of NBA players to connect with reading. Now, the thing you're like, okay, well, reading, Mark, that's a huge social ill. Well, it's kind of interesting. The most recent polling data that just came out at the beginning of this year states that fourth graders, over almost 85% of fourth graders read for entertainment. And what we do know is that reading has a positive impact on brain chemistry, helps with learning, and also increases self-esteem in most everyone that does it on a regular basis. I know, who knew? Reading, right? Anyway, well, by the time those individuals go from fourth grade to eighth grade, less than 20% in eighth grade report reading for fun and entertainment. So what's happening there? Between fourth grade and eighth grade, there's a whole lot of other stuff happening. And yes, not all of it is bad, okay? But, more TV, more movies, more, YouTube, smartphone, all that kind of crazy technology stuff that I have very, very little understanding of, well, it starts to take up more of our time. And when it does, it can dramatically impact individuals. So imagine how the NBA's Reading to Achieve program, if it helps to solidify just the art of reading with people at an early age, then maybe that's going to, that number, that 20% or less than 20% by the time they're in eighth grade, read for enjoyment, maybe that's going to be a little bit higher. Well, if you have higher literacy rates and people feeling better about themselves, that most likely is going to be some sort of betterment for society. Alright, Leith in 1983 came up with the functions of managers. And he wasn't talking about sport managers. If you noticed, it's in pink and highlighted and all that kind of stuff. Because the idea to me, though, is all these different things over here. I mean, sport managers are still managers. So everything that applies to managers apply to sport managers. It's just we're focusing on this institution because of some of the unique attributes or eccentricities of this particular institution. Now, those things aren't bad. They're just very unique to what it is that we do. But planning, organizing, leading, evaluating, controlling, motivating, communicating, decision-making, all of these things are things that you all are going to be doing on a daily basis. And planning, organizing, leading, making decisions, all of these things are going to be fraught with ethical dilemmas at some point. Maybe not every decision that you make is going to have an ethical component or dimension to it, but many of them will, and there's always going to be the potential for it. Alright, so decisions. You have at least two things you're going to choose from. Whenever you're going to resolve and make a decision, you have at least two paths. And more accurately, you're probably going to have many more decisions or options to choose from than that. Okay? It's very commonsensical. If there's certain things that your organization needs, if you're working concessions, you look and you're like, hey, we're out of that gooey, delicious nacho cheese that we put on our nachos. Alright, the decision is pretty simple. Alright, we need to get some more. There's not necessarily an ethical decision there. But oftentimes there's going to be much more of a moral current to a lot of the decisions that you do make. Think about raising ticket prices, for example. I don't know if you've noticed, but gas is going up. Man, it kills me. I hate it when gas goes up. Alright? Well, that means everything at the grocery store is going up. So in an economic recession, a constrained economic climate, people now are paying more for milk, butter, and gasoline. That's really cutting into their disposable income. But many sport organizations have to pass those rising costs on to the consumer. And so the decision is made to raise ticket prices. The moral component comes, well, okay, what if you're in a very, very economically constrained community? You know, the whole point of sport for a lot of people, not everyone, but for a lot of people, is that it's supposed to be a part of the community, and it's supposed to provide entertainment. Sport during the 1930s, during the Great Depression, sport was an opiate for the masses, and this was a good thing. It was there to distract people and make them feel good about things that were happening in our lives, even though, you know, economically we were just more or less SOL. You know, here in the state of Kansas and Texas and New Mexico and Oklahoma, you had the dirty 30s. People couldn't even afford to plant crops, and so the topsoil was literally blowing away, and you had these big black dust clouds that were roaming the prairies. It was bad, man. Things weren't good. But for those people that could afford sport, and oftentimes sport, I know of a couple of instances here in Wichita back in the 1930s where sport entertainment venues were used as a way of just getting people off the street and letting them think for a while that, you know what, there's something good in this world. It's not so bad. Well, not every industry can do that. You know, the banking industry is a little bit constrained by what they do. So sport, we have this very unique socio-moral or socio-emotional climate that a lot of other businesses and industries don't. Now, all these different things, that the morality of what you should and should not do, it's going to vary based upon what's going on in the situation, the organization, and the types of problems that you're going to be solving. The thing that we love about sport management is that it's unique. Crisis communication, right? You hit the ground running every day, and you know it's a different challenge. Well, as a result, the decision-making processes can't be scripted because you don't necessarily know what the problem's going to be. Alright, well that makes sense then. What we do know is that even though the decisions that are made, the process for making those decisions is more or less the same. You want things to occur in a timely manner. You're going to have certain issues that involve the people that are consuming whatever sport that you're involved with. You're going to have problems that involve the staff and personnel. You know, there's going to be organizational issues with protocol and policy and that sort of self-reflexivity of trying to change how we go about doing things in the organization to make things more fair for everyone. The whole idea of diversity, for example. The decision-making process, there's the definition there. It's very commonsensical. Alright? And there's usually 3 reasons or situations that are associated with the decision-making process. You have a crisis situation, which is exactly what it sounds like. I need to address this post-haste. Let's get to it. You know, and when you start looking at some organizations, and you know, maybe if you're in college athletics and you have stories of recruiting violations or impermissible benefits, that's going to probably be a crisis situation. You know, it's something very, very serious. Everything at Penn State with the alleged sexual abuse by former defensive coordinator Jay Sandusky. The Duke lacrosse scandal a few years ago involving Duke lacrosse players and some baseball players were alleged to have raped and sexually assaulted an exotic dancer. Those are crisis situations. You're not going to put those on the back burner and let's just kind of see what takes place. Okay? Now, a non-crisis situation is exactly what it sounds like. Hey, we need to better improve some of the charitable programs that we have in the community. Okay, we have some, but we want to kind of reinvent themselves. We want to reinvent how we do things, how our athletes are going to be seen. These are important things, and these are wonderful, good things, but maybe they don't necessarily have to be done in the next week or two. You can take some time to evaluate, brainstorm, kind of map out some new strategies, and then go from there. And then you have the opportunity where you don't necessarily have anything going on, but you start to see niches in the market. Kind of use the parlance of business a little bit there, where you all as an organization can do something you've never done before. Well, like what? What would be some things you could think of? Well, if you've had a long-standing role in the community with maybe your college athletic department and you have some of your student athletes involved in helping deliver Meals on Wheels programs and meals, things like that in the off time. That's good. But let's say you've been doing that for 2.5 decades. Okay, now we want to reinvent that. We want to do something good. We want to do something that you don't have a lot of other people doing. It does two things. One, it expands the charitability of your organization to many other people that need it within a particular community. But two, it's a way of kind of reinventing the CSR initiative for you and your organization. It gives people another reason to like you all. It's fresh. Another opportunity that oftentimes, and Dr. Stote will talk about this later in the semester with ethics in sport marketing and things, but oftentimes there's a decision to be made on the morality or immorality of using high-risk sponsors. If you're a pay-for-play sporting program in a scholastic sport program someplace, and you don't have the money and you can't set forth the infrastructural resources for football, oftentimes you can have someone from the community that can provide money to help those scholastic athletes, the high school kids, go out for football. Well, what if those people have, what if those companies are associated with certain things? For example, AMP energy drink or something like that, with all this caffeine. And we know that there's been a lot of research. Some energy drinks have actually been banned on high school and college campuses because the amount of sugar and caffeine and ginseng and all those other things I can't pronounce whenever I see them on the bottle, if consumed in such a way, have been associated with people, students fainting, passing out, that kind of thing. Do you want to what if you have an opportunity to use a company like that, a drink like that, to help with the sport programs? Locally, we had one high school that the athletic director had to field all of her programs with a very, very minuscule budget, a budget that wouldn't cover anything. So imagine, let's say you have roughly 12 sports, and she had about, $5,000. Well, she can't do anything with that. Well, she got half of all the concessions taken in from the vending machines in the school. That's how she was able to support and prop up the rest of her budget and provide sporting opportunities. Well, you can only imagine that it's not the Aquafina and apple slices and things like that are big sellers. It's the energy drinks, it's the the candy bars, things like that. So she was getting more and more money, so she was expanding her sport opportunities, but then simultaneously she was having trouble with athletes fainting. They would drink a couple of those energy drinks and have a candy bar or something for lunch. They would go out for sports, sugar rush, all the physical activity, and they were passing out. All right, so there's always, with an opportunity and a decision to be made there's always kind of that pros and cons to think about. Opportunity analysis is exactly what it says there. Just simply deciding if this is right for you all. Another way of thinking about the decision-making process is not all decisions are left up to the individual. No, not at all. Like if you're going to hire someone, if you're part of a state school, an athletic department, as compared to a private school, you have different ways that you have to post a job. Well, it has to be posted for 7 days in a public outlet if you're a state school, for example, here in the state of Kansas. All right, and so there's a certain protocol that you go through. So maybe the decisions are taken out of your hands because you're going to have programmed decisions. The non-programmed, those are the things that don't necessarily fit in category A or B, and that you all have to decide sort of on the fly. So, how do we do that? How do we make decisions, especially in that non-programmed way? Well, according to our friend Michael Josephson, a very smart man, character can be useful as a decision maker. Because, now, character is one of those words that I love. You win with character, not characters, that kind of whole thing. Because if we all had to define character, what is it? A lot of us would kind of hum and haw, and eventually kind of spit some sort of sentence fragment out like, well, I don't know, but I know it when I don't see it. You know, I can see a lack of character, or I can see it when someone displays character. But to truly articulate, it's a very difficult thing. Okay, that's fine. So, what Josephson did was, let's look at these aspects of character. By taking this monolithic idea of character and breaking it down into various components, then we can better understand what constitutes good character, bad character, or something in between, most likely. Trustworthiness, if I can spit it out, sorry about that. Respect, responsibility, justice, fairness, caring, civic virtue, and or citizenship. Well, all those different things, what constitutes showing respect? Well, it's based upon time, space, and place. But it gives us something to work with. It gives us something that we can digest. And when you're thinking about whether you're going to make an ethical decision, then there's a very, very simple way to do it. And we have these three criteria here. If all these three things are taken into consideration, then yes, it was an ethical action. If none of these were taken into consideration, then it's unethical. And most of the time that doesn't happen. All right? Does it, in this whole idea of utility, does it maximize benefit for everyone? The rights. Does it respect everyone? And then justice, is it fair to everyone? More likely what's going to happen is we're going to get one or two criteria. And then we don't necessarily know. Yeah, if all three of these things are satisfied, then yeah, it's good. And if none of these are satisfied, oh yeah, it's bad, man. Well, what happens if not everyone's rights are being respected? Because oftentimes the individual rights of athletes are going to be suppressed in an athletic environment. Their opinions are going to be suppressed. Oftentimes the rights of fans in certain instances are going to have to be given up so that they can participate and consume an event. Okay, then we start, okay, and then it optimizes the benefits for constituents, utility. Okay, think about something like horse racing. Now, we know that constituents are primarily people that are consuming horse racing, but you also have the individuals, the jockeys. Well, they have a vested interest in how the horses perform. But what about the horses themselves? Animal sports kind of present a very, very unique problem in the world of sport, especially with regard to ethics, because we understand maximizing the benefit and welfare for humanity, but do we maximize and benefit everyone? That includes animals. And people have even started to expand this to something like the environment with golf and the golf industry. And a lot of the chemicals that are used oftentimes are very, very hard on the environment. My younger brother works in the golf course industry, and so on breaks and stuff, I'll go home and I gotta go, and I love mowing. I don't know what it is about mowing greens. Just it's awesome, right? But think about the year-round effort it takes to keep that stuff beautiful, man. Well, you're not going to keep the rough beautiful, but you're going to keep those greens nice and soft. Well, certain kinds of grasses, they go dormant. Most grass doesn't ever die. That's what my brothers told me. It just goes dormant. But if you want to keep them from going dormant, chemicals allow you to do that. Well, chemicals oftentimes can be very hard on a water table, for example, or leaching. And then oftentimes chemicals, as they seep, they don't just seep straight down, because the way that rocks and strata in the earth are formed, they tend to go at angles. And this would be a useful time when you can see my awesome hand gestures here. But and as they kind of matriculate out, they can leach themselves and find themselves into different water systems. So you actually have one golf course that could be impacting 4 or 5 different communities. So this whole idea, it can get a lot more complicated with utility, rights, and justice than just sitting down. I mean, we all know that, okay, racism in hiring practices, well, that's no to all these criteria, and that's an unethical action. That is not good. We know that. It gets that sticky, that gray area when you have 1 or 2 of these criteria that aren't being satisfied. Kind of reviewing some of the things we've talked about, those models that we spoke about earlier in the class are just another way of thinking about making decisions in an ethical way. Again, we've seen this one before, looking at corporate social responsibility, making sure that employees are treated in a proper way. You have safe working conditions and safe products for everyone. Accounting, for example, you don't want to, you have to follow the rules of the land, but there are also different ways you can rob Peter to pay Paul in regards to accounting and kind of shift some things over. You don't want to do that, because that obviously that gets into the legal and the ethical problems here. Think about something like concussions in the NHL, player safety. There's a lot of stuff going on in terms of the health, employee treatment, product safety, excuse me. And so these models allow us to see the real impact that some of these issues can have. Now, is this model going to tell us exactly what decision to make? No, not at all. It's not meant to. But it shows you sort of the complex nature of it. This is another way, just looking at the CSR process. Very, very simple. 2 phases. You develop it and then you implement it. Alright, well, as you get to the point you've developed it and you implement it, how do you know that you're going to develop another CSR initiative down the line? Well, a lot of it depends on this whole evaluation, which is kind of off screen to some extent. Do you get anything out of this? We talked about Kohlberg and the levels of moral reasoning and understanding how morals develop over time, and realizing that most people don't get past stage 4 up in that second level, even though there's 2 stages after that. Alright? And we're not impugning the public, but a lot of times people say, okay, those individuals in the leadership positions, those people with the master's degrees, the college degrees, they're there because they have the ability to think and synthesize different types of information and make the proper decision. And when they say proper, they're usually implying this whole idea of ethics and morality. And so that burden is sort of shifted to you all as you take these degrees and you matriculate into your organizations. The expectation is going to be that you're going to make the quote-unquote proper decisions. Same as with Gilligan's. Again, remember, Gilligan took Kohlberg's ideas, and she liked a lot of them, but what she did was she focused more on women, because Kohlberg focused primarily on males. And again, this whole idea of just understanding the context, understanding the conflict between this need for caring for yourself and caring for others, integrating the individual and the community together. This is also very similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or self-actualization, in terms of a way of understanding the world around you. Well, as we do know, Lady Justice, Lady Justice with the blindfold on and all that kind of stuff, the scales are supposed to balance themselves, and the true weight of the situation will tell us what decision to be made. You all are going to have to balance a lot of different things when solving ethical problems or making decisions in an ethical way. You have, yes, your social values. You have to understand the organization and how that fits with this larger society or group you're embedded. Well, your organizational values are going to be institutionalized into codes, protocols, policies, something like that. And then those things are supposed to keep the organization working so you can provide the constituent or consumer base with whatever it is that's best for them. And that's a lot to evaluate. Well, what happens when all of these things at some point it doesn't go smoothly? How do you bring about some sort of change? When you know that there's something that you and your organization needs to be doing, how do you go about setting it? Can you force everyone to be ethical? Well, that's kind of a million-dollar question. There's a lot of different ways you can go about doing that. You can force compliance, you can educate. What we do know, however, is that there's a lot of different ways that you can go about talking with the people in your organization and your consumers. Generally, the way it's seen within the sport management industry is that the industry has a code of conduct and has kind of the industry protocol. The organizations then take it upon themselves to do what's right for them and for the consumers, the constituents. Now, how you go about doing that depends upon your scope, your mission, and what it is that your organization is supposed to be doing. Within that organization, you have all these different individuals, and you have all these different questions again. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just simply saying that these are the things that you have to deal with when it comes to making decisions. Not every decision is going to have an ethical component to it. Ordering the type of nacho cheese that's perfect for your concessions, your ballpark, that's up to you. But other decisions will. And so those individuals that have the ability to see that, hey, this is a decision, that there's something more than just a hiring practice or a firing protocol going on here. This is representative of some sort of larger social value. Those are the people that are going to make the quote-unquote proper decision, one that benefits and maximizes benefits for constituents, consumers, programs, everything like that. And then those are the people that eventually you like to see ascend to the decision-making positions within an organization, because then those people impact not just the organization, but the league. Not just the league, but eventually, hopefully, the industry.